because I really do believe like art begins in the mind and then manifests itself visually. I'm actually like super into Mark Rothko right now.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Edit Undo. This week we're chatting to Bale Legoabe, and I actually know we studied together, but to give you guys a bit of a background, she went to the National School of Arts in Johannesburg, and then she studied with me at Open Window Institute in Centurion, where she majored in illustration, motion design, stop motion, and puppetry. Very interesting combo. So today we're going to chat a little bit about her as a digital and traditional medium artist, and I'm super excited about this conversation. But firstly, welcome, Bale. It's so nice to see you again.
Thank you. So nice to see you all as well.
So maybe to just get us started off, there we go. Maybe to just get us started off, Bale, can you maybe give us an intro of, where you started out as an artist, maybe a little bit about before that, how you got into it, and where you are now?
Okay, well, just in terms of how I started out, I'd always kind of just wanted to be an artist, and I did fine arts in high school. But a friend of mine's mom kind of discouraged me to like carry on studying at a university. And she was just like, no, actually rather do like graphic design, you'll have more opportunities. And then, I ended up going to Open Window and majoring, as you said, in illustration and motion. And then in terms of like branching out into the art world. So in my head, I kind of was, set on like industry, whether that be like advertising or freelancing. Like I was just going to be a designer or an illustrator at an agency. And then we have two lecturers at our uni, Micah Bakker and Jane Crochet Hall Robertson, and they own a gallery, No End Contemporary Art. And they kind of like approached me and they invited me to exhibit at their gallery. And I was like, whoa, dope. Okay, that's cool. I'm just like a third-year motion student. That'll be fun. I get to draw and exhibit. And then that happened and the exhibition went really well. And they kind of like kept inviting me to do more shows. And I feel like they kind of like really believed in me and like saw the potential before I did. So I feel like they're kind of like the catalyst for where I am today. But it was just kind of through that connection and invitation and really enjoying it and following through by pursuing a career in fine art.
Sure. Yeah, it just shows you, right, the people in your life are really important.
Completely.
Really set the course for many things in our life.
No, it's insane. Like you just need people to believe in you. Yeah.
So maybe you can share a little with us. So you studied motion design as well. How did you then end up or going in the artistic route in traditional media and exhibiting?
So with that, motion design, like, again, kind of this expectation of like going into industry, animating like ads or whatever. But as I was like doing the course, like we use this Adobe software After Effects, and it just like did not like mesh with me in my brain. And then we had like a little lesson on Photoshop and like how to animate in Photoshop, and it's all like hand drawn, well, digitally hand drawn, frame by frame stuff. And I was like, yeah, this makes sense. And I kind of felt like more free, and that I could make these sort of like abstract compositions and whatever. So that naturally found its way into my practice. And then so I just kind of like incorporated that. And then with the traditional media, again, it was for Turbine Art Fair in 2019 that No End invited me to exhibit. And I made like, they're like, yeah, you should make a traditional piece. And I was just like, okay, that's so weird, because like I draw on the computer, but whatever, let's do it. Just like bought some Fabriano, threw some stuff together, and like that piece like really garnered a lot of attention. A lot of people wanted it. Ended up getting bought and is in some guy's collection. But like, whoa, people like really loved that piece, and it was just like so crazy. And then so same year, 2019, they were going to do FNB a few months down the line. And they were like, hey, girl, we want to take you to do FNB Joburg Art Fair with us. But the catch is we want you to make only traditional work. And I was like, what the what? Like, I don't even, like, that was, I was just like, that was just like a thing I was just messing around with. And then, that's kind of where, so I had to kind of create a whole body of work. I think it was like 10, 15 or 20 pieces. I can't remember, but like out of traditional media, and it was just kind of this new thing to me. And we did traditional stuff in high school, but I mean, it's high school, like high school art, So it was just like, that's kind of where it really began. And my eyes were just opened to this whole new process of creating with like traditional media, and just the mental flip switch and the difference in the approach to digital. Yeah.
That's crazy. So I've got a bit of a question, and maybe it might speak to a little bit of the journey during the earlier times. I mean, as a person who's kind of like during my time at high school also did a little bit of fine art. One of the things I really struggled with was like actually catalyzing a personal style. I look at all of the different pieces that we looked at in art history, and then I'd kind of like see what the people around me are doing. And, every now and then I'd find myself in some other gallery, and some artists just do things that look good, but there's no real connection between one piece and the next. And then some artists sort of learn to kind of like build a style that's recognizable regardless of the medium or the subject matter. And I find you're one of the people who've actually managed to do that, which I have to say is, as a person who has tried to, is pretty impressive.
Thank you.
How did you actually come around to sort of figuring out your style, or what did that process look like?
I think it really came naturally. So like I said, high school, starting uni, you kind of like in these courses and you're doing lots of different things. You're doing figure drawing, you're doing painting with gouache, you're doing some digital stuff. You've kind of got your finger in every single part. And then through time, like there was just certain techniques that I would pick up in each of those sort of subsects or disciplines that I really enjoyed and like really applied. And then I think how it kind of really became a lot stronger and a little bit more anchored was when I started fusing sort of concept and intention and like a rationale to it. So one of the things that I really, that's kind of the framework of the work that I create, is kind of just liminality in terms of one's emotional landscape. So how like our emotions just are so complex. You can be simultaneously happy and sad, they're just so layered. And also emotions are kind of linked to softness and vulnerability and genuineness and authenticity. So, I kind of started having this map in my mind of like, I want to be authentic, I want to be genuine, and I want to express information about emotions. And what is that? It's the layers, it's the softness, it's the delicate, intricate details. So once I started to figure that out, that kind of worked its way into everything that I make. So whether it's digital, whether it's traditional, now I'm kind of experimenting with sound art. That notion of layers and softness and, vulnerability and delicateness kind of are in my mind. So that's what comes out naturally. And sorry, one last thing, but like, it's so funny because in terms of my process, one of the things that I always do before I make work, like I have a Pinterest board and an Instagram board of like artists' work that I like. And I literally just sit there and I digest. And I'm so confident in my work and like I'm so confident in my style that I know it's not going to look like that. Like, even though I'm like literally 2 seconds before going to start a base coat on a piece of paper, I'm like looking at someone else's work. I know it's not gonna turn out like that, but there will be influences of that. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I kind of have to applaud you for I wouldn't necessarily say the confidence, rather the courage to be so brave and vulnerable, especially as a young artist. You said you were just going with this inspiration of the fact that we have all these overlapping emotions as humans. And I think a lot of artists know what intrinsically inspires them. It's just very hard to trust in your gut or follow through with that immediately and expose it to the world. That's a large step, right? To just, this is what inspires me. I'm going to put it out there immediately.
Totally. It's so hard. And I think like even in what you're saying with like that fear and like wondering if it's good enough, that's something that I had to work through as well, because, there was a season of like, and even still now, it creeps up every now and again, but, will people like this? Will they respond to this? And then, you exhibit, you're at the gallery, you see that like there's a very specific thing people are drawn to. And then you're like, oh, I need to make more of that, and that's not what it is. Really what you have to do is to be genuine and to just be authentic. And also in the way that you approach the practice, like with yourself outside of the gallery, outside of, buyers and whatever. You really need to cultivate a good relationship with your practice, because ultimately that's the thing that you're doing most of the time. So there's I've kind of like really infused a real sense of play, a real sense of like letting go, not taking things too seriously. Guys, like on those little shelves behind there's so many mess ups. There's so many things that like are never going to see the light of day. And I'm okay with that. It's part of the process. Like all that ugly crap down there is what's going to give birth to the beautiful stuff. And realizing that like one thing that really thrills me is realizing that I will never arrive. You will never get to that moment. It's a constant like learning and growing process and like a journey that you cultivate, but you have to make it enjoyable for yourself. And there can't be like unnecessary nerves and pressure and stress about what other people like. Otherwise, it's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah, I agree with you. I want to go back to what you said in the beginning of your journey, you really had to focus on working on that fear of not being good enough, to be courageous, to put yourself out there. Can you zoom in more about those moments? What was your experience like in the beginning of struggling with that feeling, and how did you overcome it?
So the start of it was really kind of just the fact. So like I mentioned earlier, that it all kind of started with FNB Art Fair and like having to create a body of traditional work there, and just like not, being like, FNB is such a huge thing. Like I can't just start and then like it's going to FNB. Like I need time, So there was really a lot of struggle, and like I was going through a lot of mental health issues at the time of making that work. So I think it also just, I remember there were just days like going down to the studio, just like making stuff. And then at the end of the day being like, this is shit. Like, this is awful. Like, no one's going to buy this. And having days and days and days and days and weeks of that. And then finally, when I had like a lot of things together and I like kind of laid them, or I have like a little video of it even, and I laid all the pieces down on the ground and I looked at them and I was like, hey, this is not so bad, So I think it's about like persisting and consistently working through the doubt, and then also support systems. So like I mentioned, I had Jane and Micah with me, and I would frequently go to them to review my work, and they're just wonderful. Like they won't like try and change your style or make you work in a specific way, but really just giving you feedback that's going to enhance your work and just kind of like honing you and building you up and like taking care of you, so having that support system. And then 2020, I kind of was like a dud year. It was kind of like very, very difficult, and kind of parts of 2021 as well, beginning like pretty much the whole of 2021, except the last couple months. But like, no, sorry, 2020, sorry. I'm getting my years confused. But I just did not make, because everything that I made, I was just like, this is actually garbage. And also I was going through serious depression on like wrong medication. So it just completely changed my practice. And then once I, kind of got out of that space, then that's when I decided that like, flip, if this is going to be my career, I'm going to be so gentle with myself, and I'm just going to go with it, and I'm just going to have fun, and I'm just going to play. And even in 2021, I was just like, okay, this is your year to play. Like, don't get stuck on a certain medium or whatever, just have fun. And then you start building a practice. And then last thing, sorry, I haven't talked so much. You have like, what I do is I have little anchors. So little, almost like rituals and practices that I do before I start. So, and nothing like crazy woo-woo, but I have like a specific pair of shoes that I wear when I work. So I'll be like, okay, put on these shoes. I know I'm working. I have like different essential oils depending on my mood. I'm like, today is like a bright sunny day. I'm feeling like a sweet orange smell. I'll put on I'll get the smell going. I'll put my shoes on. Even the way that I've curated my studio, like I was very intentional, having all the materials in a specific way and everything, so that nothing is a hindrance, that the process just flows, So having those little anchors of little things that I do, that if I am feeling a little bit nervous or a little bit scared, I'm like, okay, I know how to start, because I always start in the same way, having a specific playlist or whatever, and then just like flowing through. So it's really about, to just tie it all up and summarize, is just to be gentle and patient with yourself, to inject a sense of play into your practice, and to have certain rituals and practices that you're familiar with to start yourself off, to get yourself into that space. Yeah.
That's very cool. I really like what you're speaking about. And there were two aspects of what you've kind of said now that I'd like us to maybe dive a little bit deeper into. And I'll maybe tell a little bit of a short story about it. So you spoke a little bit about kind of some of the rituals that you sort of practice before getting into a specific piece of work. So when was it? 2020. I guess 2020 was my crucible of a year. I kind of went through my own challenges. But funnily enough, it was also one of the years where I found myself in one of the most creative spaces I've ever been in, which I think there are a lot of people, maybe I'd say one of the industries where it's maybe a little bit more common is in the music space, where you sort of have people who find a sort of creative groove, but that have also some negative either habits or or rituals that they kind of get into as a part of their creative process, whether it's substance abuse, whether it's like, excessive partying and not really living a healthy lifestyle. And that sort of forms a part of their creative process. And one of the things that I found that was really interesting is you almost need some kind of rituals to get into a creative space. It's kind of like, when we speak about trances or things of that kind, there's some people who kind of look at it with a little bit of a cynical eye, and they're like, trances are not necessarily real. It's just a bunch of people pretending and dancing and there's music going on. But it's almost like by acting out a specific thing or embodying like a sort of rhythm, your body makes the room for the mind to get into a specific space.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I was hoping that you could maybe elaborate on a little bit more was around like how some of the rituals affect the work that you do, but also how you actually kind of decided to establish those rituals. Because I don't think there are many people who actually tell you, as a creative person, you need to establish for yourself some specific rituals that are going to get you into that mind space. And, it could be positive rituals and negative rituals, and some rituals are better than others. So like, how did that kind of come about for you?
I'm very fortunate to have gone to like a super dope university, and we had an elective called, what was it called? Creative development. Yes, we had an elective called creative development, and we had a super cool lecturer. And it was one of those subjects that a lot of students just took for granted because it seemed like, dude, what is this random like stuff that you want us to do? Like with Monet. Yeah, a lot of people were like, what? Morning pages, writing down 2 pages of things when I wake up in the morning. That's stupid. Like a lot of people didn't see like how flippin' amazing these things are. But I think that elective was kind of the catalyst for like realizing that like, whoa, having rituals is important. I remember he told us that like he had like a specific apron that he would put on, and then that just gets him like into that flow. And then just in terms of my ritual, I've realized that rituals that I'm very like sensory. I really, really love to engage the senses. And I think even the way that my studio is curated, I'm also quite obsessed with beauty. And I was just like, I want this to be a beautiful space with lots of light, lots of plants, lots of, even the colors, like the soft, muted, lots of pinks and greens and whatever. This is what I want the space to be, because it's a whole, you're literally like creating a sensory experience for yourself. And again, like you said, you have the positive and the negative. And I, just a quick tangent was kind of like, I previously had the mindset that like in order to make good art, I had to be sad. And that's not true. And that's something that I had to work through. And also not like dismissing the fact that a lot of good art that connects does come out of sadness, and art is also extremely cathartic. So it's important to create, but it's also very important to kind of have the mindset that I can create in any frame of mind, especially if you want to have it as a career, because otherwise then it's just going to be rough. Then you're going to constantly be having to try to make yourself super happy or super sad in order to create. So you need to have the mindset of like, I can be in whatever mind space that I need to be in order to create. And then, so cultivating the senses, making sure that your space is inspiring. And then, like I said, with essential oils, like that sense of smell, and then with the music, the sense of sound. And there's also different processes that require different things. So there's sometimes, often I feel like, and this is all out of observation. So when I'm painting like my base coats, like the one at the back I'm so busy with, but when I'm doing the foundation of the work, I find that I want the music to be playing through a speaker and to fill the space. And I'm like working on the big surface, and I want the music to fill the space. And then when I'm working on like meticulous details and I really want to like hone in and focus. And this is especially when it's turning into like an emotional expression, then I want the music to be close. Then I put on the headsets and, then it's like super specific and like curated playlists. Now I'm not just having my thing on shuffle. I want to listen to a specific thing, and I kind of, work in that way. So there's different processes of making. And even in one artwork, the different processes require different environments and require you to create different experiences and ultimately, to touch on what you were saying, like even with the musicians and stuff, that it's energy transfer. That's what it is. You're like transferring yourself, your energy into this piece, and then it goes up onto the wall and people see it. And it's so funny. It can be an abstract thing and people can explain it to you the way that, you thought it out and made it. And it's because it's connection, Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
That's beautiful.
I want to go back to what you mentioned around, you said when you did the FNB art pieces and you had them scattered across the floor and you have like a little video and it sounds like you were documenting your process. Is that something you do often?
Yes, that's like super important to me to like document my process. Sometimes I feel like I do it like to my detriment. So I'm kind of trying to figure out like a good middle ground, but it's kind of really important for me to have like little anchors of like how I've grown and what I've been doing. And even like on like my Instagram stories, I love like just posting my process or like what I've been doing. But now I'm kind of moving into a space where I'm just like, wow, I really want to like cultivate certain, like just a flow state and just be flowing with the work, and not forcefully, but not naturally. But if I'm going to be stopping and picking up a camera or picking up my phone to take a photo, that's going to disrupt the flow, But I think as an artist, documentation is important. And I think it's one of the greatest gifts we have, in the sense that like in other careers, you don't necessarily have like visual markers of your journey. And like as an artist, you literally have visual markers of your life, which is so dope. Yeah.
I love that you document your process.
Thank you.
It is one of the parts I love about your Instagram, or
Thank you.
just following your work is seeing your process. I want to jump back to your actual work. And Alfie mentioned already, you have such a distinctive style. And I think one way I can always spot that it's Bale's work if I'm somewhere, you don't always, but you very often use animals or like a deer subject matter. Out of pure like interest and personal interest, is there a story behind it? Or I really want to know more about it.
Yeah, so there actually is, like, I can't even think when the first artwork with the deer was, but how it started was like in uni, and I was just like, I got to this point where I thought that like drawing faces was like really weird, that like, why would someone else want a picture of someone else's face in their house? Which is not true. Like, so a lot of people love other people's faces in their house, and that's fine. But in my head, it was just like, no, that's odd. And then also, I think it was like second year, we were being lectured by Nina Tor, and Nina Tor uses a lot of animals in her work, and her work is super dope as well. So it's just like flip, like, Nina Tor's got something going with like these animals, and like there's just something there. I like the idea of like having animals instead of people. So it all started like very superficial. And then like I don't even know, with the deer, like we went on holiday, my mom and I, and like we were at this place where there were a lot of borkies, and I was just like, dope, cool, just grabbed my camera, started taking photos of these things. And then it just started becoming a thing. Like, I just think they're just so beautiful, delicate, very graceful, just in like the way that they look. And there's also like a certain sense of like with their eyes. Like I have a couple that I photographed where I got their face, and like their eyes are just very, intense. Like there's a lot of innocence, but like somewhat sadness. And I think it goes back to that rationale of like the emotional complexity. So I was drawn to that because that's the thing that like I'm kind of obsessed with and wanting my work to be about. And I'm like, this animal kind of like embodies that feeling, you know? And so it just kind of became a recurring motif in the works that I make.
Nice, I love that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So I have got a question, and it's also, I think, a bit of a personal question. So, I mean, as I kind of alluded to earlier on, I kind of was pretty interested in fine arts, especially earlier in like my school time and kind of like growing up. I was never the strongest academic, so like the creative landscape was essentially one of my kind of ways out of that. And I remember, you know, I mean, I performed pretty well in art, but there was always like a question at the back of my mind that stopped me from really going all in on it. And I remember when I was young, I kind of went to an art exhibition, and you know, you sometimes go to some like exhibitions or you see a specific artwork and you kind of like ask yourself, it's like, did this person actually put effort into the piece that's in front of me, or is it just somebody who quickly put a few things together and said, this is art, you know?
Like Jackson Pollock.
Exactly. And like I could never, for a long time, I couldn't reconcile with myself, like, how do you actually define a thing as art, and when is it like a person trying to pull the wool over, like a specific creator pulling the wool over the eyes of their audience? I don't know if you've ever like kind of pondered that, or if you've got any thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Hey, sure, that's a very, very tough one. Like, I think I would approach that one in terms of like, for me, that's where concept trumps visual. So if there really is some like mind-blowing conceptual basis for this, then I'm like kind of on board. Like I'll be like, okay, like, you know, maybe like the outcome, like I'm just like, what is this? But if there really is a strong conceptual background to what's, you know, or strong social commentary or something like that, then I'm like, yeah, because I really do believe like art begins in the mind and then manifests itself visually. I'm actually like super into Mark Rothko right now, and I was reading some like little write-up interview thing on like stuff that he said and whatever, but like even his work, it's like just these, you know, big color fields that like just seem so like simple and plain, and like, oh, this guy probably didn't even do a lot of work and whatever, but just like the emotive nature of those works and, you know, the thinking behind it, the processes, the life that drove that work into being, then for me that carries weight and significance.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, us answering the question on behalf of the whole art community maybe is a little bit much. But
yeah, that's like totally personal
one of the
perspective.
things that I'm interested in is, and that's actually what I'd maybe like to get into a little bit more. Do you find that that's ever something that you sort of grapple with? Like, you know, you find yourself in the middle of an artwork and then you're like, you know, is this me doing genuine art, or is this me almost trying to put on a show? Because I always struggled with that, and I think it's because, you know, especially in your earlier stages, especially in the fine arts, you need to rely on like copying things that are either people's styles that are a little bit more defined to learn the techniques, or you need to kind of use subject matter that already exists to actually train your eye. And so like I always struggled from a personal perspective to convince myself that I was actually making art rather than just copying somebody else. I don't know whether that's something that you've ever grappled with.
Definitely. Definitely I have grappled with that. And I have like two sort of pointers in terms of how I don't want to say resolved, but how I'm kind of thinking through it at the moment. Is that like one thing, to your point, that I really struggled with, that like if I didn't take long to do a thing, then like it's not a real thing, or it's not real art. And I think also comes from like uni. We had like 8 weeks to do a project, and you were constantly getting like feedback and like reverts and stuff. And then like now all of a sudden I'll make something, and then after 2 hours I'll be like, it's beautiful, it's done. And then I'll be like, dude, like you only spent 2 hours on this. Like you need to work into it more. That's like what we always heard at uni. You need to work into it more. So it's just like, you need to work into it more, you know? So just, yeah, then in those instances, I just take a back seat. Like I had this one that I had made the other day, and it took me really quick, and I was like, yeah, this is my jam. I love it. It's perfect. Then I just took a back seat, and like a few days later, I came back to it, and I was just like, dude, this is trash. Like you need to resolve, you know? So just like giving yourself time and like thinking through things. And then what was the other thing I forgot the other thing I was gonna say. We would talk about like,
That's okay.
like looking at other people's stuff. Yeah, I can't remember. But yeah, just like just taking a back seat. And also, oh yeah, I was gonna say just like if it means something to you as well, you know, like was I just messing around? And even if you were just messing around and it looks cool, and you think, you know, this could go in the show, like it's, you know, compositionally, I think it's strong, whatever, then that's Gucci. Like don't overthink it, you know. But also like what did it mean? Sometimes you'll make something and it like really means a lot. Doesn't necessarily mean, you know, you're gonna put it in a show, or you feel like it's ready to go in a show. You might just keep it aside. And also just remembering that nothing happens in a vacuum. Everything is part of the process. So even if this is like not the greatest, it's gonna lead to something greater. So you just need to keep going. Yeah.
That's very cool.
I think the process you're referring to is not just to artists. This can relate to absolutely any creative. You know, it's a process myself and Alfie as UX designers also go through. I do find, however, when I do look back, if I give myself too much time and I look at something, I always want to improve it. It's almost never that I take time and then I'm happy with it. But it resonates with me what you say about your process. Sometimes you do need to take a step back because, you know, you're overthinking it a lot, and time can help you solve those puzzle pieces. It's a general creative process.
Yeah, definitely spans across the board.
Okay, so this is maybe less of a question and more I'd like to get your opinion on something. So, and again, maybe I have dreams of hoping to have been an artist. But one of the things I've been thinking about more seriously lately, because I think that the art scene is very important, especially when a society is in a situation of turmoil. I think that's when art becomes its most important, because it's the thing that sort of allows us to step outside of ourselves and see the world through other people's eyes, and sort of have to look at things that challenge the physical world, especially when you look at either abstract art or sort of mixed mediums, or things that you wouldn't actually experience in the real world. And so sometimes I kind of think about, like, you know, if I maybe don't have the steadiest hand to actually create art myself, and maybe I have an appreciation for the aesthetic, but I can't actually bring it to be, do you think there are ways that the layman can actually get involved in the creative scene or the art scene? And I ask this because, you know, I mean, you're a person who's kind of been at a number of exhibitions, you've had a number of shows, I'm sure you've attended quite a number and are familiar with a few artists. What do you think a person who's interested in the art space could do to get involved in some other way, maybe even more than just sort of going to visit galleries and kind of looking at specific pieces?
I think engaging in conversation is like a really, really huge one. You know, and I think the best avenue to do that is like attending walkabouts. Yeah, a lot of artists and galleries nowadays are like having walkabouts of shows where artists will talk about, you know, the work that they've created and the concepts that have driven these works. And this is like a gateway to conversation, you know, and then also just allowing yourself to not be intimidated by it, because I think galleries can sometimes be a little bit intimidating. Art, especially non-narrative and abstract stuff, can be very, very intimidating. So just going into the space and just seeing what you like. I mean, sometimes I literally go to an exhibition and like, I don't even read the write-up. I'm like, oh, I like this. I don't like that. I like this. And then drink wine and talk to people, you know? And that's kind of like what it is, you know? And like, you don't have to like, it doesn't have to be this like deep, intense thing. Sometimes it can be, and I think it should be sometimes, but sometimes it's also a thing of like, you know, you like the thing or you don't like the thing. And I think the more you go and the more you engage, then you also start to develop like a sense of taste of like what you like, you know, and that taste might start out being like a little bit not great or whatever. And then as you continue to engage, the taste kind of grows and you get exposed to more stuff. And also I think like, yeah, I guess maybe some people are not into like books and reading. I'm not a huge reader, but like even just watching stuff, like just watching. There's a really good Netflix documentary. It's quite old. It's called Abstract, The Art of Design. It's actually like, like design thing. But like Abstract is super good, you know, where you kind of just get information, just collect viewpoints. And then I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, definitely. What I would like to just ask is, you mentioned something at the beginning called a walkabout.
Yes.
Do you mind just explaining what that is? Because I'm not sure everyone might have an idea of what that is.
Sure. So walkabout is like, maybe artists or a group show, whatever, they'll have an opening. Everyone will go to the opening, look at the pictures, drink the wine. And then like a little bit down the line, maybe like a week or two later, or just before the show comes down, they'll do a walkabout where they kind of discuss, oftentimes it's like each piece in detail, or they'll just have a general, and it's an open discussion. So it's not just the artist telling you what they did, but it's just like an open discussion about the work, and the audience is invited to comment on like how it made them feel or what they think of the work, or ask questions and whatever. But it's a real dive into the concepts and ideas that drive the show and the work being exhibited. It's very cool.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
That sounds very cool.
Have you done a walkabout?
Yeah, so not with my own work though, but with, we had like a show that I'd co-curated at work. Yeah. So we hosted a walkabout and everything. And honestly, some of like there's literally still things from a walkabout that I attended that like affects my practice because of what that artist said and like the way that she approaches her work. It's like, this is phenomenal. And it still like impacts me today. So they're really, really like helpful and insightful, and it's a way to like engage in dialogue, which is like so imperative. It's like the thing that we need. I feel like it's why artists exist, is to open up dialogue.
To see Alfie smile, his medium of choice.
Definitely.
I think that's so interesting. I've never been to a walkabout, but I would love to do that, especially for a country that is not traditionally rooted in appreciating art. A lot of people don't have the learned or natural ability to put art in context or deconstruct art, or even just consume art and make sense of it or not make sense of it. So I think that's a nice gateway or entry point for people to start seeing if they even like art or not, to actually just put them in a position so that they feel empowered to formulate an opinion for themselves, because previously they're not able to.
Exactly. And I think, I mean, to your point, Steph, like, firstly, like, not a country where generally there's not necessarily an overall general appreciation for art. And I think part of the reason also just like situation and circumstance, like people are struggling to like, you know, just provide for their basic needs, you know, so all things considered. But also even dialogue and communication, like I feel like that's also not a big thing. Like we come from like hectic segregation and stuff, so you know we still kind of are working at connecting with one another, conversing with one another, and then even within our individual cultures, like I know in terms of, you know, whether it be Afrikaans culture or like Sotho culture or whatever, for example, topics like mental health, you know, it's just not a thing that you sit around the table with the family and discuss, you know. So if there are works that speak to this, that are being exhibited and conversations being had around them, I think it's just very needed and very important.
You actually give a perfect gateway to a question I want to ask. That's a little bit more sensitive, but I think so relevant. And like you say, the only way, you know, we're going to make progress is by talking about it. And I really want to get your opinion of how your experience has been as a Black South African woman producing art. Speaking from my white experience, I didn't grow up knowing or getting exposure to any non-white artists really. And even going to study art, most of the art history you look at, I can't think even, and it's almost shameful to say, think of non-white artists that come to mind. Not even non-male, because we know it's a very male-dominant history, the art history. But even, I think, in South Africa, as a Black woman.
Yeah, that's a very, very difficult one to talk to, Steph, because I'm also just like still kind of just working through it. So just in terms of experience in the art world, like I can't think of any situation right now at the forefront, and I think it's a blessing for me in my regard, because I'm sure that other people will have different experience, but I just feel like, yeah, in terms of my experience, I haven't yet felt jibbed because of my race or gender, which I'm super grateful for, but I know it's real and I know it's out there. And then just in terms of like inspiration and stuff, it's something that I'm deeply working through actually. So like even just if I think of like the way that I grew up I went to very white schools, very white suburbs. All my friends were white, like kind of that was kind of like Model C, live in the burbs with your twang, kind of like that was kind of my setup growing up. And like even now I'm kind of becoming more aware of how those like thoughts and ideals and that upbringing has like permeated my identity. And I think every Black child who's kind of grown up in that sort of like setting can relate and speak to this, that there's a lot of like undoing that you have to do, a lot of like acceptance of like yourself and like your color and like your home language and stuff like that, and that you have to kind of like work through. But even in terms of like my work, like I think of like right now I'm really into like the American abstract expressionist guys, and it's just like the Mark Rothkos and the Cy Twombly's, and I'm just like, these are all like white men, and I'm very much like aware of that, and I'm just like, whoa, dude, like all your inspos is like old dead white guys, like what's going on, you know? But it's something that I'm like, and like I acknowledge it, and I'm just like, okay, I don't necessarily like Mark Rothko because he's an old white man, but like I like those, but it's something that I'm aware of, that I'm like, shucks, that's like actually very true. That's something that like really exists. And like, like, like how many Black artists am I looking at? It's there, but it's so in the beginning stages that I'm only yet like, it's almost like still in like the back of my mind, and it's still making its way forward. Yeah. And like working through. So I don't have any answers, but I can make commentary on the fact that I'm aware of it. Yeah.
I think that's a very honest answer. And I think, even if you don't think you've answered it, a lot of people are probably in your position. And it might bring them comfort to know that they don't need to be more advanced in their answer or figuring out this landscape, because it is still unraveling. I mean, it's really nice to see South African culture giving more credit and giving more space and publicity and exposure to non-white creatives, but it's definitely still lacking. And maybe to give it some space, do you have any non-Black artists that you can shout some names out that people can like go reference or go see?
Yes. So there's Nabia Muhammad. She's an artist in Cape Town, makes really dope like paintings and beautiful collages and prints as well. She's really amazing. And then Lebogang, I think it's Lebogang Mabusela. She does Monotype Babe is like her handle and like her thing. And she does, she does these gorgeous monotypes that also specifically speak to like Black culture and being a young Black woman. So like super duper like super duper overt, just like super duper relevant as well. And shucks, who else? You see trying to think. You see, this is bad that I'm like trying to think, but there's also a lovely lady who makes these gorgeous prints. Her name is Janet Mbirimi. I hope I'm pronouncing her surname correctly. If I'm not mistaken, she's originally from Zim, if I'm not mistaken, but she does printmaking as well, and her works I find very beautiful and like connects to them. And then there's also a guy, John Palane, who does like these color pencil drawings of like maps, and his story is really amazing. He like used to be like a taxi driver and then like got into art, and his work is quite phenomenal. Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I want to maybe edge out on a limb here, because I guess I've got a maybe non-conformist perspective on the question that you asked, about the fact that, there isn't as much representation in some specific cultures and races and backgrounds in the creative scene. But I almost want to tie it back to something that we'd spoken about at the beginning of the conversation. And, this is one of those things where I'm speaking out thoughts that are coming to mind, so I could definitely be wrong. But I feel like some creative areas are a little bit different to typical professions and skill sets. When you think about things like science, things about like engineering, things like these sort of professions that are guided by a set of rules, the challenge with representation for me is a little bit different when it comes to the creative space. And the reasoning behind that is because regardless of your race, if you can follow the specific set of engineering rules or guidelines, you can sort of achieve the same thing as the next person. But when you step into the creative landscape, I almost have this feeling that in a way, those things stop mattering. Your background, your origin, your your race, all of that sort of takes a little bit of a backseat, because the thing that you're doing is you're expressing the things and the emotions and the meanings that sort of come to you. You know, earlier you spoke about the fact that, you know, you're almost reinterpreting the energies that are coming to you. And so in a sense, as an individual, you can put yourself in a space where you might not necessarily be a Black South African, but maybe what you do is you actually spend some time in, you know, a taxi rank for a few hours and kind of soak that in, and then interpret that as you might feel. And so I guess what I'm trying to get at is, I sometimes think that the creative landscape is a little bit different, because what you're expressing is more about the internal landscape. And in a sense, that is not very different from race to culture to gender even, because I mean, at the end of the day, we're all humans and we all have a unique internal landscape. And so it's always completely different from person to person. Now, I think there's definitely, you know, a role that segregation has played in our country. But I think when it comes to the actual creative process, it's one of those where we can come from the same background, we can have grown up in the same family, but what we would actually express is worlds apart, just because our internal landscapes are so different. And yeah, that's kind of just what came to mind. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, that is, that's freaking phenomenal and like hella profound, in my opinion. Just in terms of like, just thoughts on, not really an answer, but like just thoughts on it. I really think that it's like a both and, you know, that it's like, it's so amazing that it's like, it's such a like a deep, like you said, it completely dissolves race, culture, everything, you know, it just all culminates to like the essence of being human. And that's like what people like connect to, right? It's like this essence of like being human, but at the same time, the thing that led you to create the thing is like all of your experiences, and the entirety of your being is the thing that made you create what you create, you know. So I think it's quite the image, you know, that it's like it's the core and it's stripped of everything, but at the same time it's the individual, and like it would have been completely different if someone else had made it. Don't know if that makes sense.
I agree. I also think, by what you said, it's both and, because it still brings up the question to me, if that is the case, then why are we still not seeing a more diverse or fully represented art society in South Africa? And that's not our question to answer, but it's just pondering on, you know, is it because we, when I say we, I'm speaking from my personal white upbringing, I was more enabled, and given there was more room for me to play, and it was okay to express more creatively, because it was I don't know, it's such a weird, I actually don't know what the answer is, but I'm just pondering on, you know, why there is not still then a fully represented art society.
So what you actually just said now brought another thought to mind, and something that's interesting about specifically the space of fine art. Well, actually other creative spaces as well, is that it's one of the only ones where things of value rise even after the person is gone. Because, you know, you might find a specific artist who society looks down on them and they berate them and they don't they don't never see their just desserts. And then, you know, 10, 20, 30, hundreds of years later, suddenly the art starts to develop a certain amount of acclaim, and it starts to actually be put into the societal spotlight that it deserves. And so maybe it's also a thing that is a matter of time. Maybe there are some artists who, like Black, South African, both male and female artists, who are just yet to be discovered. And maybe that's where the role that you mentioned about sort of dialogue and conversation and exposing the public to the artistic space is so important, because that's sort of like the framework that allows these sort of people and these creations to actually come to the forefront.
And I think there's definitely like people and platforms out there doing the work, and like you said, none of it happens in a vacuum. Like it's all it's time, it is history, it is culture, it is society, it is art, and it's all kind of like moving a certain direction. So we can't like look at like section things out, but it's like the times and the way that they move. And there's this one podcast that I've been listening to. It's called Talk Art, and I think the guys are from the UK, if I'm not mistaken. But they also have a book, and I'm currently reading the book. But they're doing like a really excellent job at like spotlighting somewhat like emerging on their way to making it sort of artists, but like also like I'm so stunned, when I read the book and it's like these, Black women and like, everyone who's just been kind of like pushed to the margin. It's Black women and it's gay artists and like all this stuff, and they bringing all this stuff together. I think it was the section on sound art that I was reading, if I'm not mistaken. But then I was like reading the thing, and then I like Googled the artist, and I'm like, what? It's a Black woman? That's so cool. So there's really kind of people out there doing the work and spotlighting and bringing to the forefront on a global scale, kind of previously marginalized people and artists and stuff. And I guess it's just a matter of time as well. Yeah. Still lots to be done, but stuff being done.
Like you said, yeah. Just like you also still figuring it out and processing your own historic and present context. I think the whole world is, we're at that pivot. Which it's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds.
Yeah.
So we're going to close off soon, but maybe just a few questions more, one or two before we end. As a artist, can you share firstly one of your proudest moments as an artist, and then maybe the opposite, one of your least proudest moments?
Okay, proudest moments would definitely, don't even need to give it second thought, would have to be FNB Joburg Art Fair. I'm like so vocal about it on like social media as well, that like 2019 Joburg FNB was like, it was amazing. It was electric just seeing like this work that was made out of like utter and sheer pain, and like not going to go into details, but at that time I was like literally falling apart, and seeing this work up on the walls and like and seeing the way people responded and reacted to it, seeing people buy my work, seeing people ask me about I was just like, this is amazing. Like seeing the outcome, and then also knowing like all of those mornings I woke up like semi wanting to die, going down to my studio, like pondering how I'm going to get through the rest of the day and making work. And then like the reception and the human connection that it birthed was just like, no one can give you that. And then least proudest moment, I don't know. Like I feel like I don't really have one. Like I try not to be like, it's something that it's definitely wasn't always like this, but I just really work so hard at like just being super gentle with myself and like just just like just taking things as they come. So even all the bad works, even like maybe like wasting money on like random materials that I don't need, like bulk buying stuff that's like completely non-essential. Like I'm not proud of that. Like I've got like a whole thing of like these stickers that I was like, I need these. I'm gonna use them for everything. And then like they're just sitting there. I'm not proud of that. Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe a question to kind of close things off. You know, I remember during that sort of time that I spoke about in 2020, when I was kind of going through a little bit of a rough patch, I spoke to one of my to one of my mentors at the time, and he was saying, you know, as a person who is creative, you, over and above the sort of rituals to get you into the creative space, you almost need rituals that are not creative, that kind of let you detox from the creative process and just be, you know, just be a human for a while, rather than trying to, you know, contemplate the meaning of life and all such profound things. Can you maybe talk a little bit to some of the things that you do just to kind of keep you sane, keep you human, keep you in the good mindset?
It's so funny because it's like kind of the opposite for me. So like I'm super things that keep me sane. I'm a like type A, making lists, having routines, calendars. I'm that girl. Like morning routine, journaling, yoga, and meditation, all that jazz. I'm that girl. I'm very type A. I'm the girl that's like, we scheduled a meeting next week, the day before, I'm gonna call you. Are we still on? No. That's me. I'm like super type A. Everything is like super structured, like to the T, meal planning. We are working out at this time. Everything is in order. But when it comes to art, I'm just not that. So like I have the rituals and stuff to like get me started, but I've never like planned a piece. Like I don't have like a sketch of what the thing is going to look like. Like I just go in there and it's like the one thing that like I let go of all control. Like everything else around my life is like super controlled, but it's the thing that's like I go in totally blind. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's beautiful. And it's important, and I guess it speaks to what you're saying, because it is about balance, you know. It's about having that aspect where you kind of exert as much control as you can, and then having that aspect where you let life kind of take you where it wills.
And also especially because it's like a career, right? Like it's
and so
like,
maybe
oh, sorry, I was going to say, if like the exhibition is happening on the 7th of May, you can't be like, oh, sorry, guys, I wasn't like inspired enough and I wasn't able to like produce work. So like, you know, sorry. Like it's your work. Like there's a deadline. The show is happening. As in you need to call the framer like 2 weeks before. The thing needs to be done before it goes in to be framed. So it's also like, there needs to be structures, but like we can also let go.
Yeah.
100%.
No, that makes sense. Sure, Vale, this has been amazing. I've really enjoyed chatting to you.
Thoroughly enjoyed this as well.
And getting to know you and your process.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
So maybe before we kind of we call it a day, can you let people know where they can find you, where they can both look out for you online, but also if you've got any projects or exhibitions or anything going on soon?
Yeah, definitely.
How can we find you?
I post most of my stuff on Instagram, actually. So my handle is Bale, BALE __ Kane, KANE. And yeah, that's kind of like where everything happens, is like on the gram. But so any upcoming shows I will kind of post on there. I've got a couple of exhibitions lined up in the next couple months. So I'll be sharing about
Wonderful.
them. Yeah, super exciting. I'll be sharing about that on there. And then I'm currently showing at the gallery at 44 Stanley in Joburg. Got some work up there, and then I also like co-curate there as well. But mostly everything, all the information is going to come via the gram.
Cool. All right. I think let's call it a wrap. I think this has been an amazing discussion.
Yeah, really.
Thanks again, Bale, for making the time.
Thanks for asking me.
Thanks for everyone who's given us their time.
Awesome.
Always.
Mucho appreciate.
And we definitely look forward to hearing more about your work. You're definitely on our repeat list.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks for being vulnerable and just honest and sharing.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. And
Cool.
yeah.
Cheers, guys.
Ciao. Chat soon.
Let's call it a wrap. Peace.